in 3D printing for gaming. I'm one of your hosts, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param, and I'm joined by
Kristen Sowards, also known as Seventh Mastery.
Kristen. This has been like it always takes me a few weeks to recover from major conventions, and this felt like the first even though it's not, because the aftermath of Gen Con was so rumbly, this felt like my first week of slowdown. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I shouldn't say slow down. I've been going full steam. I've got so many projects in the hopper after Gen Con, but like it's the first time I think I felt like maybe in control.
Oh goodness.
The first week back was just like a screaming roller coaster of amazing cool stuff. But like now I'm starting to get the thing, like whenever you ideate a whole bunch of new projects and you do a bunch of crazy stuff, there's going to be stuff that falls off, right? There's going to be stuff that doesn't happen. And I think most of the like non-committal and like mind changes, etc., have happened, and now I've kind of locked in on, okay, this is the stuff that's really going to happen, and I'm really going to get it done.
Nice.
And still of course trying to get out some really cool prints also.
Yeah, for me, almost all my printing has been work related this last couple of weeks, because evidently I'm not going to be con free for the rest of the year.
I have heard.
Yeah, I just got word that I am required to attend Essen Spiel in Germany.
He's required to go to the coolest European gaming convention. Everybody feel really bad for him.
No, this isn't a work assignment that I was given.
Yes. Oh, yes. I'm sure it's terrible. I mean, you're going to be working a booth and you're going to be exhausted, but it's going to be really cool, and I'm super jealous.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be organizing a booth. This is going to be super stressful.
That part's fun.
It is kind of fun. But I don't have like all the details or anything like that, and I shouldn't give any of the details beyond that I am going right now. But a lot of that has been like, well, as you can imagine, we need miniatures and stuff. And so like I have been like printing demo armies and mailing them to Europe, and like getting ready for all the things that we're going to need to
I wish y'all had a bigger budget. I'd go be your booth, babe.
Oh, I know. And like a lot of the stress actually was just see if I could get my passport in time, because like this is not new news for me.
You were
obviously,
not sure. You were not sure.
Yeah, I found out like weeks and weeks ago that we were going to do this, but I had to get my passport. And for those of you who are not in the know, right now, the passport queue is clogged.
Takes a minute. I had the same problem with my cruise last year. First cruise I ever went on, and we weren't sure we were going to get them in time, and then it got rescheduled because the doom.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, it only took me 4 weeks to get mine. I did the expedited thing, which was very expensive, and then the expedited shipping, which was also more expensive. And I didn't get anything wrong on the forms, because evidently the big delay that will screw you over is if you get anything wrong.
Yeah, it's messed up.
Then you have to get back in the back of the line.
Yeah, it was way more than that. James and David Wickham are confirming that it's usually a lot longer.
So like I'm gonna be, I'm super hyped, because like I haven't gone out of the US before. So this will be my first trip to Europe, and it will be to the biggest gaming con in Europe. And there's the European gaming scene is just so awesome that I'm always jealous when I hear about it. Because the tons and tons and tons of indie creators over there in the miniature space, especially, that we occasionally get a few of them that decide to spend the extra to show up at Gen Con or Adepticon or something like that.
Right, but they can't bring all their physical stuff. Like I follow a lot of them on Instagram and other social media platforms, and there's some of these people have like massive cool castles and all this stuff, and I'm just like, I want to play with that, but they're not going to ship that over here. Very rarely.
And I'm also very curious, of course, about the 3D printing side of things that we will see over there, because as we mentioned, Gen Con was just covered up in 3D printing. Like it was just like behind everything. And over there, I imagine that they are going to have some amazing displays and stuff. I would very much my ultimate dream is to like see if I can 3D print a life-size sci-fi gator
Sci-fi get like the big alligator lizard
with the
dudes. The ones
rocket
that,
launcher on the shoulders.
yeah, okay.
I would love to do that. Like I've been watching a bunch of creators that have been doing those life-size prints and stuff. Like Uncle Jesse's been doing a life-size Magneto, and there's some creators that have been doing some life-size Halo figures, and then of course a bunch of Loot fans have been doing like some of their graveyard sets as like Halloween decorations. And the just audacity of doing a life-size 3D print is awesome, but also the fact that it's even possible in our hobby to do it makes me want to do it just to see if I can. It's kind of like when I modded out and fixed up that old Game Boy that I didn't need a new Game Boy,
Right.
because I have a Steam Deck and a billion other devices that can do
I'm
everything
sure
that
no
Game
one
Boy can
needed
do.
that RNA Studio Drow Assassin 6 foot tall, but it looked cool when they did it.
Yeah. I just want to do it, and then I'll figure out where I put it.
Yeah.
Oh, Blessed Seven Sage would like to do a life size of one of their own aliens.
Just get one of those printers we were talking about that you can sit in, and I'm sure it'd be fine.
Hey, James. Hey, David. Hey, Blasted Semiflinge. Good to see you all in chat again.
As a reminder, this is recorded live, and we stream it on the YouTubes and now on my Twitch also.
Ooh. What's your Twitch address? We should get people to follow you.
Seventh Mastery.
Seventh Mastery on Twitch. Go check
just
it out.
like it is on TikTok.
We will link it in the show notes. You will give me the link afterwards.
We'll do.
But like I've been printing a bunch of extra minis of like the starter armies. So like Robot Legion, Eternal Dynasty, Mummified Undead, and Saurians. Big old lizards, stumpy lizards. And also found out that mailing stuff to Europe can be wildly expensive or not very much.
Yeah, it depends on where you shoot it to.
I know. So I got this cool, like I packaged it up all nice, and compact. Like this wasn't a huge package. I think it was like 14 inches on one side and like 8 inches square on the other. So like not a very big package. And it's all subdivided into like sub cartons for structure and all that jazz to protect the minis, so that they make the trip over there, hopefully in one piece. And so to get them over there, I had to ship it. So I was like, okay, UPS. UPS is how you ship packages, right? So I went to UPS and they said $500.
Yeah, no, you don't do that.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, $500.
I was going to say something, but Blasted Semiflinge did it first, which is that it's actually cheaper to ship to Europe than it is to Canada.
Wow. I don't understand it.
I didn't realize that, and a lot of my backers from my first Kickstarter were in Canada, and oh goodness, did that cost a lot of money.
So I went to the good old United States Postal Service to ship these 3D printed minis. And then I had to explain. Now, I went to my very local post office, and I live in the middle of nowhere.
You had to declare what it was, and they were like, what?
I had to explain to them what it was, and then I had to teach them how to fill out a customs form, because they had never filled out a customs form before. And it took me over an hour sitting there talking to this really sweet old lady who was like all the patience in the world and very amused at what we were doing. And even like other people were walking into the post office, and you have to understand, if you've ever seen like old country Waltons or anything like that, this is the vibe. Like it's like, oh hey John, get a look at this, he's sending something to Portugal. Have you ever even heard of Portugal?
I've had a few backers in Portugal, so I have.
So I had to walk her through how to fill out customs forms and like get it all shipped out. And I hope,
but they had the custom form somewhere, right?
They had to dig them out of storage and dust them off.
I may have seen this.
Oh my gosh, it was so fun and so wonderful. And then I went to the little dairy bar afterwards to get lunch. So I completed the country experience while I was at it.
Do they recommend sending a telegram instead? That's funny. I think it's interesting that like you didn't just tap a local fabricator over yonder, but You didn't know one, I'm assuming.
These were the painted sets.
Oh, so this is your actual like army, your
the ones that you saw
armies.
the pictures of. We was like, we need to make sure we have painted minis for Spiel.
Sure,
And the
sure.
best way for me to do it was to just send them the ones that we painted.
You already had the ones that Tony
for
apparently
TMX.
painted. The
Yeah,
mummies.
Tony helped paint with Tony and David.
Yeah.
They met me up at TMX and we
Yeah,
spent the
in
evening
Wisconsin,
painting
right?
minis in Wisconsin. Yeah.
Mhm.
The day before the con, we painted over 100 miniatures.
I remember the pictures.
It was fun. I liked it, and I guess I'll have to do it again now because
I'm assuming that army will stay in Europe with
probably
with is anybody else from OPR going to be at the booth?
Oh yeah, there's going to be lots of people. I can now. I have to stop talking.
No, I understand. I understand.
Yeah. I have to stop.
You got private stuff to keep to yourself.
Right,
but
right.
Needless to say, it'll probably stay there with one of the OPR people that already lives in Europe.
Right. Yeah, I don't see a reason to ship them back when I can just print another set
and make some more. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, especially since like 3rd edition's coming out. So
you are the delayed fabricating. What is it? Distributed fabrication system. It's Barum.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Saturn and the Saturn 3 just like. I can throw an entire one of these armies fits on the build plate and just bop 2 hours later, done. And really the painting them is the slow part of all this.
David Wickham's asking, are the ones he did going to Europe? I suspect they are.
Of course, yes, they are all in Europe now, David.
You are now a international artist, David. How does it feel?
Oh, so on to the topic at hand.
Yes.
Did you get a Jupiter, David? Did you buy a Jupiter? You need to tell us in chat if you bought a Jupiter. I still cannot justify a Jupiter, especially now that like the resolution of the new printers are so high.
Yeah, I was about to say,
Jupiter's resolution is so low compared to them.
Yep, and it has the rectangular pixels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which could cause some light distortion. I'm sure it's fine. But
I mean, if you're going to be printing things humongo scale, then I get it, but not for production like we do. It just wouldn't make sense. I mean, just the drop in quality is just not worth it at that scale. But speaking of the drop in quality, moving on to our topic. We talk about all these cool things we're doing with our game groups and all these cool games we're playing and all the stuff that we're 3D printing for these games. But like, the sad fact is having a game group is a privilege. Like it is, we are very fortunate to have in the positions we are, where we have multiple game groups and can play just about any game we want, anytime we want.
That is pretty rare, actually.
Yeah. As one of the community leaders of my local gaming community, if I want to play Scythe tomorrow, I can make it happen.
Wow.
If I wanted to play Flamecraft, the Cool Dragons Do Cooking board game, I could get one of those by this weekend and we could play that. If I wanted to play Raccoon Airship Pirates, which is a
did you buy that? I almost bought that.
I didn't buy it only because I couldn't find the booth on the last day and I got lost and I had to go.
Yeah.
I would have bought that. I had every intention to go buy Raccoon Airship Pirates, the RPG. That was at the Indie Press Revolution booth. And if I wanted to play Raccoon Airship Pirates, I can get a group to play Raccoon Airship Pirates. But there have been polls like over on Discourse Miniatures. She did a video recently where she talked about this very thing, where for Warhammer specifically, but this applies to a lot of different game groups, like 90% of the people who identify themselves as in the Warhammer fandom do not play the game regularly.
Yeah. And a ton of people who are really, really good painters don't ever use them.
Right. And so many people, I know this from my time at No Direction, like they're humongous fans of Pathfinder, but can hardly get a game. Or there's just, so what do you do when you want to play games, but you know, you're not in a game group? You have to make one.
You do. If you build it, they will come. I'm just kidding. Sometimes they don't.
So this is an unfortunate reality that sometimes you have to be the change you wish to see.
It's true.
And one of the best ways to play any game is to organize and get ready to play it and actually do the work to get the groups together, to get the places together and actually do it. And this does take a little bit of an extroverted tendency to do it. And I understand that that's not easy for all of our listeners. So we're going to talk about what's involved in that, and also to tie it into the episode, things you might want to print for getting together your first games with these things as well. So at least we tie a little bit into the theme of our show.
I mean, you're also going to be printing things for these games you get people together.
Oh,
so I think it's still very, very adjacent to our stuff.
Yeah. Because you can't play these cool games if you ain't playing these games.
Well, like for instance, and this is me shilling for you, and I know you can't do that, but I can because I'm not affiliated currently with OPR. And I will say this, OPR is really popular conceptually, but like you have to do a little legwork to find a shop that lets you play, or you have to be willing to host at your house. And, you know, I think that's one of the first things you do is have to scope out that location, right?
Right. So, which brings me to the first thing. The first thing you need to do when you're wanting to build up a game group is you're going to need players. And there's a few ways to go about it, but if you're new to an area, especially like let's say you're moving into a new area and you this is your first time in this town, you need some players, and this is going to take a little bit of work. You're not going to be playing your cool game next weekend.
No.
If you really want to get that Raccoon Airship Pirates game together, okay, this is a game that's not super. I'm using this because it's a game that's not super popular.
And it isn't an overt bias in the community. However, if any of you creators want to make us raccoon pirates with airships, we'd be interested, I think.
Looking at you, Arcane Miniatures.
Yeah. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So you want to get your game of Airship Pirates together, and you just moved into a new area. You need some gamers. But where do you meet gamers? Well, thankfully, there are some options available to you. But my favorite way to suggest this is to go play other games that other people have put together. So go to your friendly local game store, figure out which ones are your friendly ones.
Awkward, uncomfortable local game store, depending on where you live.
And find out when their board game night is, when their Magic the Gathering night is, when their D&D game is. And just start integrating yourself into that community. Start showing up for Adventure League night. Start showing up for board game night and like making acquaintances. The cool thing about being a nerd and playing tabletop games is it is an instant hack to making friends in new locations at a rapid pace.
You know what also helps accelerate that? When you show up with really cool 3D printed minis you painted, and some people are like, wow, what's that? And I'm like, well, I use this for D&D, but it's actually from this other game. Cue conversation.
If you're willing to play other people's games and to show up for the events they organize, they are much more likely to respond to your call to arms when it is when you sneak in that Raccoon Airship box into the table. You're like, "Hey, gang, let's give this a try." So the first thing you need to do is make some games. If you've already got some gamers in your area that you know, then you've already got like a leg up. You know what the local gaming groups is. You can talk to them and try to convince them. But the basic gist is you've got to start making some connections. And the only way to make connections in the gaming world is to start playing games with people.
I have a second suggestion, actually. Okay. If you are fortunate and privileged enough to live near a community with a convention, even a small one, go to the convention, go to the game panels, and ask the question during the panel, hey, how would I get a game group together? Now, the panelist isn't going to necessarily have a great answer for you, but there will be people in that room who are going to be like, well, I'm looking for a game group. And I have met so many people who want to play different games just by like, how would you manage a gaming group or whatever the question is? Just that community. And they're at least probably local enough that they could go to the same local convention. Now, I understand that that's not going to work for everybody.
Right. Yeah. And having a local con is itself a privilege,
right?
Absolutely, especially one that has panels, because there's lots of like local cons that are like one day swap meets, basically.
Sure. Same thing with demoing though, or exchanging, stuff. You can always have your side card of, well, there's some 3D printed minis I wouldn't mind parting with, but they're for this other game. Again, just kind of be like, showing off the wares. Khajiit has minis if you will play.
That is the next key is you've got to do a lot of the work. You need to make it as when I was in web design for commercial websites where we were designing storefronts, a common phrase that we used was every time you introduce a friction point, you lose half your customers. Like half the people that everybody is basically looking for an excuse to say no at all times.
Sure.
And every time you give them the opportunity to say no, half of them will.
Yeah.
And so it's a long haul to get them all the way to the game table. In fact, it is famous that the final boss of D&D is scheduling.
Yeah. I mean, that is 100% true. Even I've been doing one-shots with people on TikTok, just other TikTok content creators, and that is some cat wrangling. Although we've actually had a couple already, so I feel pretty good about it. But like trying to match up like 72 people's schedules, it's been crazy.
This means that if you're wanting to do a role-playing game, you're probably going to have to be the game master at least the first time.
Yeah, that's true.
Which means also you need to know the game and know the rules and get all the accoutrement that you need to do it. And that does mean a little bit of a risk. Like how many of us have bought games that we never actually got to play?
I'm literally looking at my gaming wall right now. So many.
And if you are interested in some board game or war game, well, board game, at least your life is a little bit easier. I find that it's a lot easier to get people to try out a board game than just about anything else, because it's just a contained experience. But you do need to be the one that knows the rules and can efficiently teach those rules in a quick fashion. That is a skill that takes a little bit of practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, though, if you can do it successfully, you will establish yourself as an authority. And then your opinions will be given weight to people when they start to go, oh, what else do you like to play? And you're like, well, look at my pile of tentacles and horrors, you know. And,
oh, no, not the tentacles and horrors.
But do have a pile, and have a pile of some, nice, boring guys too. I think you're heading towards this, and maybe I'm preempting. But if you already have a couple extra armies for a skirmish game or something to introduce people to and have them ready to go, that is huge. Right. It definitely reduces that barrier of entry.
I am definitely heading that direction. If you want to introduce people to a war game or a tabletop game of that matter, you really need to have, nothing does better to pitch a game like that than having two painted armies ready to go against each other and setting that up and say, hey, could you play this game with me? And then people will just be thrilled to get the chance to play a game with a cool setup of terrain and board and armies. I mean, you're going to paint them anyway, right? Like that's what most people do in this hobby instead of play the game, is paint them up minis. I've got so many painted armies over here for various fantasy games.
Mine aren't organized as armies because I use them mostly for D&D and stuff, but like I definitely have at this point like a whole huge chaos army. I have a whole huge alien whatever army, though my cat destroyed some of my mind flayers the other day. I have enough to definitely field a bunch of other things, some cyberpunk stuff that I printed up for some Starfighter actually, which would also be a good skirmish team.
And if you're doing the RPGs, having the cool minis and the cool accoutrement will make people at least catch their initial interest. The novelty of the nice looking terrain and the cool miniatures does and is like it's a toy, and that people like to play with toys, and that breaking that initial interest barrier is the hardest part of this. I know that like when I play like Pathfinder a lot or any sort of RPG, like I have a collection of like over 5,000 painted miniatures for RPGs, and that has been a humongous asset for getting things done and getting people to pay attention. I remember when we were running Reign of Winter, and I pulled out, I said, hey, I'm sorry, gang, this fight called for 4 Dullahan's, but I only have 3 Dullahan miniatures.
Only have 3.
And then it was like they were just impressed that I had any Dullahan miniatures to go.
I think I only have 2, so I'm sort of jealous. Anyway.
Yeah.
There's another piece to this too, because we're talking about physical space. So if you're gonna do this, you're gonna make the minis. You're gonna have the thing. You also need to have your play space. Right.
So where do you play?
Yeah, exactly.
Where do you play? The options are your house,
Your house, yeah,
if you or
which
your apartment or whatever your home domicile is, if you're
your
lucky enough to have a
Airbnb.
cool game room that is conveniently located and you have people you trust to bring over to your cool game room, then you can do that, and that works wonderful when that's the case. I love playing here in the tavern. Like, I built this place to do that. You can play at your friendly local game stores. They usually are very accommodating of people showing up and playing games and scheduling games.
I have some caveats.
Uh-huh.
If your friendly local game store sells Warhammer or other similar miniature games to the things you are printing, use some tact, folks.
Yeah, don't brag about. Yeah, that's a big key. If you're playing at your game store, you need to make it so that your game store is glad to see you.
So
I print all kinds of my stuff. My game store never cringes when I walk through the door because I buy so much stuff at that game store and encourage people to buy things at that game store.
So yeah, how I've smoothed that over for myself, there's a local store called Gajo, and I never get the hairy eyeball because I go in there and I buy my painting supplies there. And they know I'm going to buy paint every time I walk in the door. And they've no doubt that I am a paying customer who wants paint. And because I print so much, I buy way more paint than your average Warhammer player.
Right.
And I'm sure their margins on the
It's
paint,
because you don't have to spend it all on 6 Space Marines.
right? I don't have to. I can use my what is it, Leviathan box set, or what's the other one we use? Horus Heresy box. I get that all back, and I can spend it on paint, and still have money to buy D&D shit. So
yeah, I have bought all of the like really cool brushes and handles and all the little tools and stuff at my local game store. Basically, the entire army painter section has gone home with me.
Pretty much, right? Over a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's like
that, and then a lot of the Vallejo also went home with me.
So many dice boxes. Like those little cubes filled with 36 tiny D6s. I bought so many of those.
The disintegrate cube is what we like to call that, because that's your disintegrate spell dice. When you're throwing all those, if they fail their save. What I was going to throw out though is, make sure you're doing that. You're having a good relationship. If it's not paint, then maybe look at getting your terrain there. Some sort of thing, because space occupied in a game store costs money, and if you're competing, especially in a multi-use game store that also sells like card games and Magic, that's some high ticket to compete with. So definitely make sure you're doing that. Or if they sell food, buy their energy drinks or food, whatever they do, just make sure that you're giving them some money that'll really go a long way to getting some comfortability having you in the space.
Yeah. Like, I have a rule that I never go into a game store without leaving with something. Just in general. If when I travel around a lot, both for work and for pleasure.
Yep.
And I'm always hitting local game stores just to see what the local gaming community is like. And now that I do work for OPR, I'm also like scouting and seeing like, hey, when we start getting, would I start encouraging play of our game here? So it's also reconnaissance, but I always buy something, absolutely something. If nothing else, it's usually like a paintbrush or a dye or a couple of bottles of paint. But like it might be something small or it might be something big. But I make sure that I don't leave the store without giving them some money. And that especially if you want to talk with the game store about the subject, doing it right after making that purchase opens them up a lot more than before you made that purchase.
Absolutely. And you do have to also be sensitive to their schedule. Like a lot of times, like you're going to run into Friday night and you're going to think, oh, I'm going to run OPR for my buddies, or, Kings of War or whatever it is. And you show up and it's FNM, Friday Night Magic. You are out of luck, because those tables are making way more money with Magic cards than you're ever going to give them.
Remember step 1 when I told you to like start joining the local groups? That was your chance to learn what the local schedule was and where the holes in that schedule
maybe
are.
Play with those Magic people. I don't know if you remember, Magic had blind box minis for a while, and you would have like a little life counter or like a token. Instead of a token, you'd put out your little angel minis and stuff. You could do that with your 3D printed stuff. And people be like, mega floored by that. And you could be like, yeah, I do this sort of stuff all the time.
There's so many cool like Magic the Gathering stuff available for 3D printing, like deck boxes and
Oh yeah.
cool little mana card dividers and like all sorts of things.
+1/+1 counters, loyalty tick ups for your planeswalker counters. There's so much stuff you can print for Magic.
Yeah. And if you show up with that, playing with that stuff, you're definitely going to get some attention.
Yep. And then you're going to get that nice lead into, bringing them over to, whatever it is David says, or you could just play with the 40K decks. Yeah.
I mean, you could do that too. I had some fun with those decks when I got to play Commander. Yep. Now, the other location that you can play are community spaces. Depending on where you're at, you'll either find a community center or your local library will often have spaces that are available. Sometimes you have to pay for the spaces. Sometimes they're just available for free if you just book them. But that's also a very common place that people get together to play games on the regular. Like I know that like my local library has like little meeting rooms that you can book out well in advance, and they don't cost you anything, but you just have to make sure you reserve them.
And you usually have to have your card renewed, and it'll be like attached to your card. But here's my advice on this one: clean up after your group.
If this is true space that isn't yours.
Yes, but like if you want to get in good with the librarian, make sure that space is pristine. Make sure you've got, even go like maybe gather up some loose books and take them back. Like, hey, these are some reshelves. I just was on my way back up from the gaming room and I grabbed them. If you want them, whatever. That stuff goes so far with the library crowd. I am book folk. I used to work for Barnes & Noble, and they're cousins to the retail book people for sure. And there's such a vibe of respect of somebody who's just willing to make sure they don't leave a disaster behind them. Yeah.
I run a lot of groups out of my local gaming store, and that's also doubly true there, where I will tell them that we'll often come into a space and it's already dirty before we even showed up, but from either last groups or just daily life. And I always tell the group, like, we're leaving this place spotless. We're leaving this place better than it was when we came in, because we don't want them to think we come and make a mess, and we want them to think we respect their property. And also be super respectful. If you are organizing these groups, you are the de facto leader and representative of these groups. Everything that everybody involved in that group will reflect on you, and anything you do bad and turn these people off is a chance that you will lose access to spaces that you want to play, and this becomes infinitely more difficult. So be very respectful to the other customers, to the places that you're at. Be respectful to library staff. Try not to make too much noise if you're playing in a space that you're having to share with other people. All of these things are very, very important and very easy to go out of hand if you're not prepared to do that. This is again why, and unfortunately, it does take a little bit of an outgoing personality type to do this. And if you find yourself you don't have that personality, make really good friends with somebody who does, and do it together. This becomes a lot easier to convince a third person to play with a group of two than it does to get
100%
people to play with a group of one.
At Gen Con, there was an indie adventure creator, and that's all they did is just kind of system agnostic adventures that were little zine sized. And this person was just this remarkable salesperson, and then there was this kind of like specter haunting the corner of the booth. And as I was talking, because of course, me, I just start rambling and talking about this stuff. And I'm not going to say the names of these zines because some of them were horribly inappropriate. I think I showed you one of them when I got back to the room. But the gentleman finally admitted that he actually doesn't run the company. He is just a friend of the Spectre creator in the corner who can't talk to people comfortably. And so he's partnered with this super gregarious, like super nice Canadian dude who is just like so like connective. And that's what you got to do. If that's not your skill set, find somebody who it is. And usually you can pay that person in miniatures, by the way. So if you're a 3D printer, you can buy their loyalty with minis for sure. The other thing I'm going to say, and this is going to be hard to hear for some of you, you got to be welcoming and you got to be open. Do not gatekeep. Do not shut people out of your group. If you're in a public space, you got to be willing to let people play with you, especially if you're in a local game store. You're there as an ambassador of your hobby, and poor behavior or nastiness. Like if you get like a really good friend group together, consider taking that group home. Consider taking that out of the space, because if you're going to get like a closed loop play cycle and you're not willing to teach new players, not willing to explain the game to people who are watching it, you're going to give off a bad vibe, and it's not good.
And that's how you grow community. Any community that is not constantly gaining new members is a dying community.
Absolutely.
Because there's only so many games each of us have in us for various reasons, through burnout or incident. Eventually we will not be able to play these games, and like gaming groups lose people all the time to moving away, to just having other interests,
life
family,
stress, yeah,
having family, kids have killed so many gaming groups that you need to be welcoming new players into your group all the time in order to just replace at replacement levels. It's just like any other sim that you'd be playing. You've got to keep replenishing that population, or else it's going to die out.
And don't stress if it starts to feel too big. There's going to be a natural mitosis point where the people who have a certain play style or certain whatever are going to start driving, and you will feel your group. And it might be upsetting at first, but you will feel your group divide.
Yeah, when that happens, just go with it.
Just go with it. Don't fight it. Just let it happen. Yeah. I fought my gaming group doing that back during the 4E Pathfinder debacle, and it was very hurtful. Like, and I should have just let it. Should have just water off my back, but I did not, and I fought it, and it was just a mess. And I do not recommend that at all.
Right. Yeah. And besides, people come back, people's interests change, people's availability change. And if you handle an exit gracefully, that's that much easier to have them rejoin the group in the future. And this is especially true if you're playing in the game store environment or a club environment where, it is expected that you will play in public with other people watching. In private environments, this is a little bit different. These all still apply, but you're not going to have, like, even at a public library space, if it's a privately booked area, you're not going to have too many people wandering in going, ooh, what can I play? But in a game store setting, you are absolutely going to get civilians that are going to be walking by going, ooh, what's that? And that's your chance to grow the group. The more people, the better for most game groups.
Yeah. David says, I asked my friend if he's having another kid every time he tells me he wants to run D&D.
Oh, gosh.
That is some truth to it, but I'm going to say something. There's something beautiful happening right now because the gaming renaissance is with us. Thank Stranger Things, thank Critical Role, thank Henry Cavill talking about 40K and normalizing or mainstreaming it, whatever it is. The community is just huge. It's getting bigger, and there's so much energy. And we are seeing generational gaming now, where their kids are coming to dad and being like, hey, I used to play D&D, will you teach me? And I think that is so cool. Like, kids are learning, Warhammer and stuff. And that used to be kind of like a rare, weird animal, but it's becoming more and more like a normal thing to see these groups.
Favorite games when I was running Pathfinder Organized Play was when a father-son pair would come in, or a mother-daughter pair would come in, and it'd be like, aha, this is fun. This is very fun.
So one of my playtests for City of Seven Saras, one of the groups that did it at NorwestCon, dad and son, and then first son ever playing any role-playing game. First time was my thing, and he was playing with his dad. And I told them, by the way, as a surprise, I am putting you guys in as a book. So there's a little thing that's like the circle of the tinfoil hat, because that's what they picked, because one of them did a tinfoil hat joke thing. But so this kid and his dad are in my book, like, forever. Their first time playing is like in print there, and I think that is so cool that I got to be part of that. Anyway.
So now that you've got your cool group and you've done the work, the other thing you need to do is consistency. Set expectations and follow through.
Yes.
The rule we usually had is, if a game group missed once, it happens. Like 1 week in a row, hey, things come up, things happen.
Yep.
Twice in a row, we're worried about the group.
Bolts are gonna rattle.
3 times in a row,
someone's not coming back.
The group might not last. Usually 3 times in a row means something is fundamentally wrong with the group. And
either a scheduling conflict or someone's not committed. Something's wrong.
Yeah, and this isn't like a individual basis. We're talking about cancellations, and life does happen. Like COVID happened, and my group didn't meet for 2 months. That happened. Um, things will come up, but when you put together one of these groups, the best way to make sure that it stays a group and continues to grow is just to meet consistently at a schedule. If you decide you're doing every other Thursday, make sure that it's a priority, that you don't cross schedule things on it, especially if you are the leader of the group. That people are only going to be as committed as the person who put this thing and organized it together is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Another thing I'm going to toss out is if you're like me and you go through periods in life where you don't have a ton of people to play with, and you bank up all these things you want to do. You want to do wargaming. You want to do like Kings of War. You want to do OPR. You want to do D&D. You want to do Pathfinder. You want to do all this stuff. Don't try to fire hose the new people with all that content. Pick a game and play it a few times before you move on to another thing. I call it system surfing. And system surfing, even if you're consistent as heck, unless your whole gaming group is as into it as you are going to freak them out because the rules are going to keep changing. They're just there for beer and pretzel fun. And you are like, okay, now we're going to play Gloomhaven, and now we're going to play, and like, you will lose players. You will drive people away because it's a lot. And you will have that familiarity from learning the system, for studying it, getting excited and familiarizing yourself. They are introducing every time the first time. And it's a lot to dump on people. Don't do it. Pick one and stick with it for at least 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, and start with bite-sized manageable chunks first. Like if you're wanting to get a group for D&D together, start by doing a small adventure together first. Maybe a pre-written just a pre-con that can do 3 or 4 sessions, and then go like in the first set expectations right away. It's like, hey, let's try this out, and if this is working out, we can play a longer campaign after. So don't go in, we're going to do Curse of Strahd right away. It's going to
so many people.
We're going to do a little one shot to see if we're cool as a group, and then we're going to do Curse of Strahd.
I asked if, like, hey, I said a TikTok about, I've heard some people had their first game with Curse of Strahd, and I thought it was maybe like, dozen, 2 dozen. No, it's hundreds of people that were thrown into that thing. 0 experience. I'm just like, that's a lot to ask someone to do, especially because it's also a long campaign.
Yeah, a lot of times that book is not thick enough to be as long as that campaign actually is.
Yeah, absolutely. It is for sure. And especially if you're going to go back and bring any content from like 4th or 3rd or 2nd edition, you can make Ravenloft games just massive. And what people don't understand is, you're like, let's play a campaign of D&D. And you're like, okay, I like Critical Role. Let's get, Wildemount or whatever. Those modules are commitments of like 30 to 50 weeks. And even if you're meeting once a week, that's like a year. And
like if you're going to play Pathfinder Adventure Paths, which are even longer, they're like 6 volumes of 120 page books. That's a 2 to 3 year commitment to get through one of those if you play weekly.
Yeah. A lot of people do not understand that at first. And so like I've recently had this conversation with somebody in my Saturday game, like, we've been playing for a year. I'm like, yeah, congratulations, you're a new player, but you've been playing a year. You're an old hand now. And I was like, but we're 6th level. Yep. I was like, welcome to Milestone Experience, buddy. Because if you ran like Fast Track Pathfinder, you would be a lot higher level than that. But anyway.
Well, even then, like those adventures go literally 1 to 20. And so that still takes a long time to get through all 20 of those levels.
Yeah. And like I said, with Milestone especially, like, could take a long time. Anyway,
you mentioned Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven's great. That's a year of a commitment to play that board game all the way through. And legacy games, like you might want to start with something small to demo. Like let's play Hero Quest for a couple of nights and then decide if we are going to commit to this. Also, Gloomhaven's like $200. So
I would probably, I still haven't ever bought it. It's so expensive, especially if you get all the bells and whistles. So you start with like your Hero Quest, and then you play Talisman, I think.
And if don't ever recommend people play Talisman, man.
Why? It's a full night. It's just a big long night.
My local group uses Talisman as a way to haze the newbie.
Oh, because it gets PvP at the end, you mean?
Well, because it's fantasy shoots and ladders. Like there's no real strategy. The game itself is just like randomness to random.
I don't know about that. I think I've seen some strategies, but it's okay.
It involves kidnapping a princess and a donkey.
Mm-hmm.
That's the strategy to win talisman. Okay, here's the secret. You want to win basic talisman, make sure you get the donkey and the princess. They will not survive.
I just make sure that I can take out the other players if I need to.
I mean, that's also true. It gets very PvP.
It does, which is that part is pretty bad for a new player. We were specifically talking about new Gloomhaven, by the way. I would not onboard a D&D player that way. I would just get them playing a very basic, like one shot or 3-shot or
Mines
something.
of Phindelver or whatever. Like there's a reason those intro they exist.
But it's played so many times. Just make your own. Oh no, that's fine. There's fantastic starter games out there, and they now have Dragons of Stormwrath Isle or whatever it is. There's other options. Mines of Phandelver has been done a lot. Unless you're going to go into the Phandelver campaign book that they just released or releasing, then there's a reason to play it again. But I myself have already played that like 17 times, I think. So.
And this also, like, whatever. I also recommend, like, if this is your first time playing a system, go get a pre-written adventure for it. Not even if you're not going to run the adventure. Those pre-written adventures are a way for the developers of the game to tell you how a game of this a campaign of this game is envisioned to run, and will help you understand like what the possibility spaces are for the game you're playing.
And one of the things I'm going to recommend, if you're going to use pre-established things, do kind of look into what the game's ideal group size is.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are just like, 5e is just so easy. We're rolling over everything. We're doing this, really hard module, and it's so easy. I'm like, you have 7 players in your group. That is scaled for 4 people. It's going to be a cakewalk. You have too many players playing the game. So, like, if you are playing with more than 4 people with a 5e adventure, you got to change it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My favorite group size for RPGs is 3. 3 players in the GM.
Mine is 5, but go on. I like to hear your reasoning.
It gives a lot of people. It makes sure that everybody has a lot of spotlight time.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it's make sure that, and it's a manageable chunk where everybody gets to know everybody very, very well. I find that 4 players is fine, but at that point in time, somebody is usually not getting enough spotlight time in any given group, and anything beyond that is just like people are getting scraps of attention.
So for me, 4 is actually the perfect size, but 4 is vulnerable to cancellation really bad. 5, you can lose a player or 2 and still run the game. Mm-hmm. So that's why I lean towards 5. 4 is awesome if everybody's committed. Mm-hmm. And if you got people show up every day, every time, then 4 is great. 3 to me, sometimes you get really weird parasocial stuff happening, or you have to have a DM NPC to get that 4-person balance, which can lead to some really unusual things. I'm not going to elucidate that too much, but just remember, look at the box, look at whatever the guidance is for your module, figure out what that expected group size is and compensate for it, because that's one of the things that people are like, I don't know, I bought this module and it didn't work and they all died. I'm like, well, you had 2 players. You did a really hard module with too few people and they all died. That's just math. It's not your fault.
But anyway. when you're prepping for these games, it's important to prep well. And if you've got a 3D printer, you can 3D print some amazing things for these games. Don't overdo it. Especially if you're traveling.
Oh, definitely, if you're traveling.
Yeah, don't like, hey, you've got this awesome terrain set where you can build the entire dungeon. You can build Curse of Strahd's castles 1-to-1 scale and like have every single room. And like, how you getting that to the game store? Do you have like a dolly to pull that into the library? If you're playing at your own house, do you have the storage that this is going to take? Like, these are all things to take into consideration. Also, you don't need to print every possible monster in the module before the first session. Print a little bit beyond what is realistic that they will encounter.
Definitely. And pick your battles, We've talked about how full wall dungeons can actually be kind of obtrusive to some players. So maybe just take a back wall run, just that gives that extra bit of flavor, or if you're even going to take that much, or use paper terrain for your dungeon or tiles, really simple stuff. Foam craft tiles are good. And actually, there's this product, I was trying to look it up because I can't remember the name of it right now, but they're just boxes that look like dungeon rooms.
Yeah.
And they're just boxes, and they're stacking boxes. You get a whole bunch of them. They all fit together really nice. There's actually a little room in the middle that if you put some padding down, you could probably even fit your minis in it, and you could just carry the box, and that would be that. One little cute box, maybe slap a DM screen on top of it and go.
Yeah. For monsters, just print the monsters that you're going to need for the session you're doing and the session after, and get them ready to go.
Yep.
For terrain, especially getting started, especially if you're traveling, print like a bunch of pillars to mark out the corners of rooms, and then doors to mark out the entrances, and furniture. You're going to want tables, you're going to want weapon racks, you're going to want treasure chests, you're going to want monster bedrolls, or like things to signify where people sleep. And also, think in mind that was for a fantasy or D&D, like run through that equivalent thing for whatever setting that you're playing in.
One of the things I'll recommend for both D&D and 40K and whatever it is, ruined corners, just the corner pieces that are ruins. You can use them to find runes. You can use them to just use a scatter. They're super useful. They're very easy to paint up and look fantastic. There's a lot of tutorials about literally just black, zenithal, dry brush, highlight, and you're done. Like it's so easy to get like really fantastic looking terrain, especially like the post-apocalyptic, rusty looking stuff. Fantastic. So
absolutely. And also, if you're just now getting started or just getting things together for the group for the first time, don't overcommit what you intend to do. Like TPK's terrain says, speed paint is a must so fast. Yeah. Don't think that you need to have your Warhammer army painted like a Golden Demon award.
Yeah.
But don't think that you have to have every single monster exactly right. It's okay if you just come with a bunch of chess pieces and the only miniatures are the player characters. That's fine.
Yeah, totally. Blast Samifudge says making small scatter terrain and deployed barricades, going to get some 4-inch coasters and make those a playmat. I mean, that's a great idea, honestly. If you just got there's a lot of those just kind of like flat coaster setups that you could totally turn into makeshift tiles or terrain.
Yeah. All right. So I think we give you the advice. Other things you can print to help get people hype is if it's an RPG and one that can be supported by a custom creator such as like Hero Forge or Eldritch Foundry, get them to send you the file, get them to make the models, and you print their model for them. That'll help tie them in and start getting them engaged in the things right away.
Yeah, the process of making it and possibly painting it. Also, there's a lot of really cool just minor accessories like spell trackers that are just like a little pegboard, and you move your spell slot stuff. It's great. Really visual for new players.
Yeah, little hit point counters are always loved in just about whatever game you're playing. If you're doing a war game, you can get all the correct tokens to mark all the correct things, and the objective markers and the wound trackers and stuff. That's also great.
If you have an FDM, I've seen some really, and you could probably do it in a resin, but I've seen some really nice little just name tag holders where you just skill frame, and that way your new players can just slide a piece of paper into it, and it just says Tom or whatever, or has their character name, and that's super handy too.
Yeah. And especially little small things that they can keep as little keepsakes will help endear you to the players and help them remember the game outside the game.
Yeah, I almost always send them home with their minis unless, there's a darn good reason. Like if it's pre-gens for a con, I won't do it. But otherwise, and actually we had that experience recently where the Eldritch Foundry minis for Tales of the Valiant were sent home with us.
Those are really cool.
Yeah, they're great minis. We talked about it the entire con, and I think it was brilliant for them to do that. Yep. And build that community that way, right?
All right. Well, that is bringing us to the end of the topic. Anything you want to shout out to before we bounce, Kristen?
I do, and I kind of wish I had caught this last week, and I didn't. I'm super sorry to listeners for this. If you go to Epic Miniatures Patreon, they are now having a public-facing post daily of a free mini.
Ooh.
And they have an immense backlog, fantastic sculpts. and they're just giving them away, and they are even to non-patrons. So daily, if you check in with them, obviously they're going to show you one of a set of 3, and so you're going to be tempted to go buy the rest of the set. I get it. It's smart, but they're giving them away every day right now, and it might just be for this month, but definitely go check it out. Knowing them and their ridiculously massive offerings, I wouldn't be surprised if they're just giving them away for the rest of their duration.
Blessed Samoflage asks, would you recommend, if you run a game, giving the player the mini of the character they played? Would that be a good time to use non-painted minis? Yes, I do. Some caveat here. If you're printing a mini at home for people to play in your game, print 2 copies. Let them take one, and when they break it or forget it, you have the second one.
I always do this. I usually print 2, and I actually do a reverse pose print. And I do one for them that's like a take home. I do the painted one for the game. I do a primed one, and I offer them to come paint it sometime, because I also want to get them into painting, because as much as I love painting everything all the time, I could use a little help.
Yeah, and some people want to paint the minis. They're super excited about that, but the other players, it's a chore. Ask them what they want. Don't assume.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and that will do it for us. If you enjoyed what you hear and want to hear more, you can find more at printyourgames.com. We're also on all the socials, the Twitter, the Facebook, the YouTube, where you can find us. And until next time, I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perrin.
I'm Kristen Sowers, also known as Seventh Mastery. And don't forget to use your screen protector.